If I was asked what my favourite Palladio building was, I might say the Palazzo Porto Braganza, partly because it is unfinished and therefore looks a little eccentric, and that appeals to my rather eccentric tastes, and I suppose it appeals to the eccentric tastes of the 21st century. And it is a wonderful fragment, just 2 bays of a facade which would have been much longer. 2 bays of enormous Corinthian columns which stand upon stacked pedestals, so that the stacked pedestals serve to mark out the lower story, and the columns themselves, the huge columns themselves, serve to mark out the main accommodation on the levels above. So that's what I might have said, but I suppose in the end I would have to concede that my favourite building is Palladio's Church of the Redentore in Venice, partly for the same reasons that I like Palazzo Porto here in Vicenza, and that is that it makes such spectacular use of three-dimensional and enormous architectural forms. That is, enormous half columns, which in the case of the Redentore are coupled with a smaller order in this brilliantly simple or deceptively simple arrangement, which serves to mask the irregular silhouette of a church and dress it in a classical vocabulary of columns and pilasters. That's not all, though, because the facade of the Redentore works so particularly well because of the way you see it and the way you can approach it by way of a boat, so that you can see it both close to and from a great distance in a way which is impossible for most other buildings by Palladio. And in that sense, the design is much more successful than Palladio's slightly earlier facade of the Church of San Francesco della Vigna, where you can't see the whole facade really from any vantage point, and the facade is oppressively overbearing, perhaps. That is not the case with the Redentore. And you approach it in a very romantic manner by way of boat. You reach the facade, it gleams white in its stone, and then you enter the building, and there again you have a remarkable surprise, because unlike any other interior by Palladio, you're greeted with a colossally vast, luminous interior, deceptively simple interior, painted white or partly made out of white stone, but brilliantly illuminated with huge windows underneath the vault. So for these reasons, the interior of the Redentore is a beautiful experience. But we shouldn't forget it is a historical building as well, and it was brilliantly conceived to serve its function as a Counter-Reformation church, in other words, as an enormous preaching box for a potentially vast congregation. So in a sense, it takes up ideas, contemporary ideas in Rome, which you see in the Church of the Gesù, but it then transforms those ideas into a different architectural vocabulary, which is well suited to Venice and is typical of Palladio. So although it is, in a sense, a serious religious building aimed at aimed at serving a serious religious function, it is at the same time a beautiful aesthetic experience for all those people that don't share quite the same views about religion, who might perhaps include myself.